Who is really destroying Indian culture? The person who teaches a poor child to read, the doctor who treats a sick villager, a social worker who fights untouchability and child marriage, or the politician who divides citizens in the name of religion while economic interests quietly take control of their land and resources. This is not a question against any religion. It is a question about the kind of India we wanted to build. From a Christian perspective, education, healthcare, dignity, and social service are not instruments of cultural destruction. They are expressions of the Christian conviction that every human being is created in the image of God and therefore possesses inherent dignity. The first point I wanted to ponder was modern education, an attack on Indian culture. One of the allegations frequently heard today is that Christians damaged Indian culture by introducing modern education. You might have heard it, and many of you might have uttered it. That argument needs to be examined historically. Education did not become a Christian conspiracy merely because Christian missionaries established schools. Missionary educational institutions became particularly significant in regions where education had been restricted by caste, gender, poverty, or geography. You are very well aware of all it. Girls, Dalits, Adivasis, and economically disadvantaged of education that had previously been inaccessible to many of them. The question, therefore, should not simply be who introduced the school. The more important question is who was allowed to enter the classrooms. If education enables a child from a poor family to read, write, think critically and participate in the public life, how can that be described as the destruction of culture? Education can certainly transform culture, but transformation is not necessarily destruction. A society that abandons untouchability, child marriage, caste discrimination, superstition, and the exploitation of women is not destroying civilization. It is attempting to make civilization more human. Research has repeatedly demonstrated the relationship between education, poverty reduction, and the decline of practices such as child marriage. UNFPA's analysis of NFSS 5, for example, identifies poverty and regressive social norms among the factors sustaining child marriage in India. Even the government of India has acknowledged that child marriage is associated with the social customs, illiteracy, poverty, low status of women, and lack of awareness. So, when Christians establish schools, hospitals, and social institutions among marginalized communities, the proper question is not whether they are destroying Indian culture. The question is whether they are helping Indians overcome the injustice that have historically existed within Indian society. The second point, what happens when social service is relabeled as conversion? Here lies a serious contemporary concern. A Christian may enter a village with a Bible, but he may also enter with a school, a medical camp, medicines, food, literacy programs, disaster relief, and assistance to the poor. Christianity certainly includes evangelism. Christians have every right within the Constitution to profess and propagate their faith. But propagation is not the same thing as coercion. If somebody is genuinely forcing another person to change religion through violence or fraud or coercion, the law should act. But an allegation is not a conviction. This distinction becomes especially important when anti-conversion laws are invoked against Christian workers or ordinary worship gatherings without clear evidences of coercion. In June 2026, for example, 11 people, including 3 pastors, were arrested in Rajasthan following allegations that tribal families were being induced or persuaded to convert. The allegations were reported as allegations, and the investigation was continuing. In another widely reported 2026 case, Christian groups raised concern after 13 Christians were detained following a worship convention in Rajasthan amid allegations of forced conversion. There have also been earlier cases in which Christian workers were arrested under anti-conversion provisions, despite subsequent disputes over the factual basis of the allegations. A US State Department report noted concerns that anti-conversion laws had sometimes been used in ways that restricted religious activity and that convictions were comparatively rare even though arrest and legal proceedings could severely disrupt the lives of those accused. This does not mean that every allegation is false. It means sometimes much simpler. Let evidence determine guilt, not religious identity. If a Christian is guilty, prosecute the Christian. If a Hindu is guilty, prosecute the Hindu. If a Muslim is guilty, prosecute the Muslim. But do not criminalize an entire religious community because of an allegation against an individual. The third thing that I wanted to bring before you, that is the irony. Who is really protecting the poor? There is another contradiction that deserves attention. In some places, the poor villager is told, Christians are coming to destroy your culture. But the same villager may simultaneously face poverty, inadequate health care, poor educational opportunities, caste discrimination, unemployment, and insecurity over land. Then comes a large development project. Suddenly the question becomes, who owns the land? This is where the debate about Christianity sometimes became a convenient distraction from a much larger economic question. India's tribal communities have constitutional and statutory protections concerning land, forest, and displacement. The fifth schedule, PESA and the Forest Rights Act contain important safeguards concerning tribal land and consultation. The government of India itself has repeatedly acknowledged these protections. The Forest Rights Act, for example, provides that forest-dwelling scheduled tribes and other traditional forest dwellers should not orderly be evicted from occupied forest land until the recognition and verification process is complete. Yet, land conflicts continue. This raises a fundamental question. Why is the Christian missionary sometimes presented as the greatest threat to the tribal community, while the much larger question of land, corporate interest, displacement, and economic power receive comparatively less attention? We should not automatically accuse every development project or every corporation of wrongdoing. Development is necessary, but development must mean development of people, not a development at the expense of people. The fourth thing that I wanted to talk to you, welfare must not become a substitute for justice. Another danger in contemporary politics is the transformation of citizens into beneficiaries. A government gives a kit, another gives a pension, another gives a subsidy, another gives a free commodity. These programs can be valuable and necessary. A welfare state has a responsibility to protect the vulnerable. But democracy became unhealthy when citizens are taught to think, I received something, therefore I must remain silent. A pension is not a substitute for dignity. A welfare kit is not a substitute for justice. A subsidy is not a substitute for land rights. A government benefit cannot purchase the conscience of a citizen. The poor do not need merely to be recipient of political generosity. They need education, healthcare, employment, secure land rights, constitutional protection, and the freedom to make their own choices. The fifth thing, the danger of dividing India into religious camps. India's greatest strength has always been its diversity. Christianity is not an alien phenomena that suddenly arrived yesterday. Indian Christianity has a history extending back many centuries, and the Christian community have participated in India's educational, medical, social, and national life. Therefore, to portray every Christian as the anti-national is historically unjust and constitutionally dangerous. A Christian who serves a leprosy patient is not anti-national. A Christian teacher educating a poor child is not anti-national. A Christian doctor treating a tribal villager is not an anti-national. A Christian priest defending the dignity of a Dalit is not an anti-national. A Christian citizen who criticizes government policy is not automatically anti-national. Citizenship does not require political silence. And patriotism does not mean agreeing with every government. The sixth one I want to talk to you. The Manusmriti question must be approached carefully. There is also deeper ideological concern. Some critics fear that contemporary identity politics is moving India toward a social order based on ancient hierarchical ideas associated with the Manusmriti. This concern should be discussed carefully rather than through exaggerated claims. It would be historically and politically irresponsible to say without evidence that every present government policy is literally an attempt to implement Manusmriti. But India must certainly remain vigilant against any attempt to revive caste hierarchy, hereditary inequality, or discrimination in the name of tradition. The Constitution of India is unequivocal in its commitment to equality, dignity, and the abolition of untouchability. The Christian vision reinforces this moral principle in its own language. Every human being bears the image of God. Therefore, no human being should be treated as inherently superior or inferior because of caste, birth, tribe, or social status. The seventh one I wanted to bring it out, the Nero analogy. When minorities became convenient scapegoats, history provides a powerful warning. The Roman historian Tacitus recorded that after the Great Fire of Rome, Emperor Nero sought to divert suspicion by blaming Christians and subjecting them to persecution. The historical circumstances of ancient Rome are obviously different from contemporary India, but the political psychology is worth remembering. When a society faces complicated problems, political power can sometimes find it easier to identify a minority as the enemy than to confront the real causes of those problems. Economic inequality is complicated. Corruption is complicated. Land acquisition is complicated. Unemployment is complicated. Caste discrimination is complicated. Poverty is complicated. But saying Christians are converting our people is simple. It creates an enemy. It creates fear. And fear can be politically powerful. That is preciously why democratic citizens must resist scapegoating. The eighth point that I wanted to bring before you. Christianity's answer is not hatred. The Christian response should not be hatred against the majority community. Christianity must never answer religious nationalism with another form of religious nationalism. Our answer must be truth, service, justice, and love. Jesus did not teach his followers to dominate society. He taught them to serve. He identified himself with the hungry, the thirsty, the stranger, the naked, the sick, and the imprisoned. Therefore, when Christians educate a child, treat a patient, defend a vulnerable tribal family, or oppose discrimination, they are not necessarily abandoning India. They may be expressing preciously what they believe Christian discipleship requires. What kind of India do we want? India does not need an India where Hindus fear Christians, Christians fear Hindus, Muslims fear Christians, Dalits fear dominant caste, and Adivasis fear losing their land. India needs an India where every citizen can worship freely, educate freely, work freely, own property securely, speak without fear, and live with dignity. If a Christian is guilty of forced conversion, let the law punish him. If a Christian institution commits fraud, investigate it. If a missionary exploits the poor, expose it. But if a Christian school educates a poor child, a hospital saves a life, or a social worker defends the dignity of a marginalized person, do not turn service into a crime merely because the person serving is Christian. And equally, if a Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Buddhist, or atheist performs the same service, let us honor that service too. Because the real battle for India's future is not Christian versus Hindu. It is truth versus propaganda. It is constitutional citizenship versus religious exclusion. It is human dignity versus exploitation. And ultimately, it is a choice between an India built on fear and division and an Indian built on liberty, equality, fraternity, and compassion. As Christians, our message to India should therefore be neither accusation nor retreat. We are not here to destroy India, We are here to serve India. We are not here to erase Indian culture. We are here to challenge whatever in any culture dehumanizes God's children. We are not against development. We are against a development that sacrifices the vulnerable. We are not against the state. We are against injustice wherever it occurs. And if India truly believe in the constitution, then no citizen should have to prove his patriotism by surrendering his religion. Let us not create enemies where there are fellow citizens. Let us not use Christians as scapegoats for India's deeper problems. Let us build an India in which the poorest Indian can say, I am equal, I am free, and I belong here. Yes, dear friends, that is what we wanted to build up in this nation. Thank you. Thank you for hearing me.